The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 454. The Conquest of the Devildom. Part 9. In his past life, when Jung-Heek Baek reached the heaven stage, he once took to the training grounds to test his power. "So, you mean, use my full strength?" "Yes," said Jung-Heek Baek. His opponent was the Blood Demon. A figure who had made significant contributions during the conquest of Murim, recognized by all as the demonic cult's greatest master. He peered at Jung-Heek Baek with a slightly peculiar look in his eyes. Though he had always harbored the goal of surpassing the divine demon, it was rare for the man to initiate a sparring match like this himself. He had already heard his explanation. Jung-Heek Baek had reached a new stage and needed an opponent to test his strength against. Seeing no reason to refuse the request, the Blood Demon drew his sword, unleashing his powerful aura. "Xing. I'm not the type who knows how to hold back. So if you get injured, you better not call it a coup." He himself had made recent progress. He needed an opportunity to test his skills against Jung-Heek Baek, and felt it fortunate that the man in question had made the offer first. Of course, he wasn't as confident of victory as his words implied. Jung-Heek Baek had already been a powerhouse during the conquest of Murim, and if he had reached a new level, victory would be impossible no matter how hard he struggled. Still, he wanted to try. To fight. After a long beat of suffocating tension, the Blood Demon decided to make the first move. And in that moment, as the world turned white around him, he saw it. A destructive power capable of ending his life in a single blow. Thump. Cough. The battered Blood Demon spat out blood and looked up with disbelief at Jung-Heek Baek, who gazed down at him. He thought he had somewhat closed the gap between them. But the moment he experienced that strike for himself, he had no choice but to accept what he so desperately wanted to deny. "I must give up now. It is impossible for anyone to catch up to you, my lord." From that day on, no one challenged Jung-Heek Baek. Of course, there would always be foolish riffraff, but they couldn't even pass the gatekeepers he had appointed, and all lost their heads before they could reach him. Meanwhile, those who could be called true masters never even entertained the idea of challenging him. Aware of the extraordinary heights he had reached, power even more overwhelming than they had seen from him during the conquest of Murim, they regarded him not as human but as something else entirely. It was a solitary life. His desire to grow stronger remained, but the lack of opponents to test his skills against had plunged Jung-Heek Baek into solitude. It was boring. Tedious. He no longer used his full strength against anyone, and never got to experience the exertion of a good, tough fight. Though he still went to the training grounds to swing his sword day after day, the lack of a goal to strive toward left him with a feeling of emptiness. So he always hoped that someday, an opponent capable of blocking his strongest strike would appear. Only then would he be able to use his full strength. Only then could he truly go all out. The atmosphere shifted. The moment the words "truly fun" left Roman Dimitri's lips, the Demon King felt that this mere human was looking down on him. But that was as far as he got. Before he could act on his sense of affront, Roman Dimitri had already closed the distance. "Demon King, make sure to use your full strength." Right as the telepathic message reached his mind, Roman Dimitri's sword went right for his legs. "How dare!" Rumble. Rumble. He summoned his mana, which engulfed his massive frame, and then sent it crashing down on Roman Dimitri's head. But just before the blow landed, Roman Dimitri twisted his body out of the way like he'd expected it and deflected it by the skin of his teeth, smoothly following up with a strike of his own. The moment the Demon King registered the movement, a searing pain tore through his forearm. Flash. Blood spurted from a fresh wound. The Demon King's expression contorted. But more important than the pain was that Roman Dimitri had vanished from his sight. Whoosh. Rumble. Anticipating the Demon King's instinctive reaction to his arm being cut, Roman disappeared from his line of sight and into his blind spot. By the time the Demon King noticed his presence, Roman Dimitri had already slashed his leg. In a lightning-quick counterattack, the Demon King spread his massive wings and unleashed hundreds of projectiles made of pure, condensed dark mana. Die. Bam. Bam 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 bam. Pure dark mana rained down from the sky. If his opponent intended to scurry around like a flying squirrel, he might as well completely devastate the surrounding area. At that moment, flash, rumble, a massive aura sliced through the air. Faced with the strike rocketing toward him, the Demon King was forced to hastily dodge, and his wings tore as he plummeted toward the ground. It was an unbelievable attack. Roman Dmitri had mostly used limited bursts of mana until now, but just then, he took a page out of Alexander's book and fully unleashed it. Roman was a man of practical application. Instead of ignoring newly acquired knowledge, he actively employed it according to the demands of the situation. Whoosh whoosh. Bam 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 bam. As soon as they landed, they exchanged blows. The Demon King parried all of Roman Dmitri's charges, while intermittent blasts of dark mana vaporized sections of the battlefield. But none of the attacks landed. Roman Dmitri reacted swiftly, as if anticipating all the Demon King's responses. If his strategy against Babel, Piver, and Belzerd had been to overwhelm them with sheer strength, now he took absolutely no chances. Only then did the Demon King realize that Roman Dmitri's fighting style had never been about strength. It was just that, since he never needed any special tactics to defeat his opponents, he simply used brute force to subdue them, and people had no choice but to bow before that alone. But Roman Dmitri regarded the Demon King as an equal. So, discarding any sense of complacency, driven solely by his determination to defeat his opponent, he rushed forward again and again without allowing the Demon King a single moment to catch his breath. Rumble. Rumble. Aura flashed everywhere. No matter how the Demon King attacked, Roman Dmitri countered him. It was something he hadn't ever experienced before. Roman Dmitri. Rumble. The Demon King's aura swelled. The mana erupting from him flickered like a massive black sun, then swallowed his opponent's form. It was a tremendous wave of energy. He'd made it so that there was absolutely no room to dodge, forcing any living thing in its range to face the attack head-on. Rumble. And in the center of it all stood Roman Dmitri in a telltale stance, defensive form, iron spirit. This time, instead of evading, he plunged straight into the heart of the dark mana and once again used the Divine Demon's Sword technique, accompanied by the Divine Ruling Step. Flash. Bam 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 bam. Perfectly adjusting his stance according to the situation, Roman ripped through the magic slung his way with one powerful swing and barreled toward his opponent. This time, things were truly dangerous. The Demon King, realizing he might be defeated if this continued, quickly reabsorbed the mana he had poured into his most recent attack. Bam. Bam 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 bam. The blow struck him head-on. Distracted by the powerful, and potentially deadly, attack rattling his bones, the Demon King momentarily lost track of the one who made it. Whoosh. Wah. And Roman Dmitri didn't miss the opening. Having closed the distance between them in an instant, he sliced the Demon King's chest right open, unstoppable. Splurt. Blood spattered on the ground. As his hide split like butter, the Demon King met Roman Dmitri's cold gaze with trembling eyes. Am I being overpowered? The mere possibility of being outmatched was one that the Demon King found utterly unacceptable. He had never once experienced something like this in all his years of living. Fizzle. Fizzle fizzle. Dark mana leaked out of his chest, alongside dark red blood. As he looked down at it, the Demon King found his mind a roiling mass of confusion. At this rate, I am going to lose. Unbelievable. Unacceptable. Unimaginable. The Demon King had always wished for a strong opponent to appear and bring meaning to his boring life, but now that he was in real danger of being defeated, he felt no enjoyment at all. That was the difference between him and Roman Dmitri. Unlike Roman, who had started from the bottom and clawed his way up, the Demon King had never once been the weaker party. From the moment he was born, the Demon King had been powerful. He overwhelmed everyone around him without effort, and when the era of great chaos arrived, he naturally ascended to the throne of the Demon King. It was simply a matter of course. Yet, the moment he realized his life was in danger, all of his senses seemed to sharpen acutely. Roman Dmitri was a man who had reached the heavens. A moment's carelessness against him would mean defeat, and the Demon King wouldn't be able to escape meeting the same fate as the 3 corps commanders who died facing him. He refused to allow that to happen. In the fleeting moment it took for his opponent to charge toward him, the Demon King came to terms with the fact that he'd been well and truly cornered. I acknowledge you as well, Roman Dmitri. And by defeating you, I will be reborn as the true absolute ruler of this and all worlds. Rumble. Rumble. His mana flared, his eyes turning purple. The Devildom was the Demon King's dominion, and he let its power flood through his entire being. He was the ruler of this world, and dark mana, steeped in blood and death and ripe for the taking, made up every part of it. His mana surged and thrashed, his muscles bulging as the surge exponentially increased his size. I do not lose, his enormous form thundered. He wished for competition, but did not desire defeat. He wished for someone strong to appear, but did not desire an equal. From now on, in order to defeat the human known as Roman Dmitri, the Demon King, too, would put his life on the line. So resolved, he spread both arms wide as if to embrace the charging Roman Dmitri, and then let the full extent of his terrible power loose on the world. Darkness, obey my command. Flash. Crackle. A violent, pitch-black wind blew and kicked up into a vortex, which began to release colossal amounts of dark magic that threatened to consume everything around them. The earth beneath Roman's feet shifted, then cracked as darkness burst out of it. The explosion that followed was colossal, completely annihilating everything in the vicinity, and as his opponent stubbornly dodged out of the way, the Demon King bared a mouthful of ferocious teeth. Whoosh. Rumble. A giant fist slammed down. The Demon King, now large enough to dwarf Roman Dmitri's tiny form, tracked him around the battlefield, attacking indiscriminately. But even as he did, Roman Dmitri didn't flee. Meeting the Demon King's attacks head-on, he managed to deliver several more slashes before slipping into his blind spot. Whoosh. Rumble. It was a fierce battle. Neither yielded an inch, and the shockwaves they gave off with every clash were so violent and intense that no living creature could approach the surrounding area even if they wanted to. The Demon King and Roman Dmitri were otherworldly beings. They had surpassed the limits of mere mortals, clearly demonstrating what it meant to enter the realm of godhood. In this battle, the slightest of slip-ups could result directly in death. Whenever the Demon King released a blast of mana, Roman would close the distance and charge at him. Whenever Roman attempted a counterattack, the Demon King would use his massive form to his advantage, refusing to let himself be moved. The world itself shook each time they clashed. And unlike the Demon King, Roman derived genuine joy from the overwhelming, exhilarating battle. All this time, I have longed for such a moment. The opponent before him wasn't one who could be subdued by sheer strength alone. Therefore, he couldn't just default to using the divine demon's sword technique and instead had to constantly use his brain to create openings. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in a very long time, back when he'd been at the bottom. For Roman, who had struggled for survival from the moment he was born, the crossroads of life and death were a familiar place, though one he hadn't visited in many years. Bam! Bam 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 bam! He countered whatever attacks were thrown his way, his head on a swivel. After blocking a burst of mana, he delivered a slash to his opponent's arm, dodging the Demon King's counterattack. This time, he slashed his torso. But the Demon King had taken the hit on purpose. The moment Roman's blade sank into his already healed chest again, the Demon King fired a deadly beam from his glowing purple eyes. Bam 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 bam! The Demon King and Roman Dmitri moved as if in tune, partners perfectly in sync. And, at the climax of their vicious dance, they both instinctively seized a split-second opening. Whoosh! The Demon King once again summoned his mana. Roman Dmitri once again slid into the divine ruling step, drawing upon the power of the final phase to meet him head-on. Roman Dmitri. Rumble. Rumble. The Demon King's eyes went wide. He'd intended to crush his opponent completely with this attack, but as he let it fly, he witnessed something unexpected. His mana surged forward like a tidal wave, but Roman Dmitri, whom he expected to run right into it, suddenly changed direction. He didn't use the Divine Demon Sword technique at all. After luring the Demon King into a false sense of security, convincing him that he would act according to his previous attack pattern, Roman Dmitri slipped into a small opening untouched by his onslaught. The Demon King, in that fraction of a second, a flash of time too quick for the human mind to register, was able to react and hastily redirect his spell. But flash. Stab. A splash of blood hit the earth. Though he was still a distance away from Roman Dmitri, his sword had soared through the air to pierce the Demon King's heart. The Demon King's pupils contracted in disbelief. This was a technique he'd never seen before, sword manipulation. While not as powerful as the Divine Demon Sword technique, it perfectly exploited the opening in the Demon King's defenses, delivering him a fatal blow. Chapter 455. The Conquest of the Devildom. Part 10. Strength drained from the Demon King's body. Blood poured profusely from his pierced heart, and the dark mana around him, having lost its binding force, dispersed in all directions. Due to the loss of mana, his massive form gradually shrank. When he finally reached a near-human size, the Demon King couldn't hold out any longer and dropped to his knees. How on earth? That final strike struck his blind spot dead on. Though it was an attack he would have been able to react to if he had seen it, he only realized what was happening after his heart was already being skewered by the perfectly timed blow. He couldn't quite understand. After absorbing the Devildom's dark mana, he was sure he possessed the strength to defeat Roman Dmitri. And indeed, Roman Dmitri seemed appropriately wary of his power. But when he replayed the fight in his head, he found he had been overwhelmingly on the back foot. Why? How did this happen? The Demon King himself was unaware that the answer to those questions boiled down to a difference in their origins. The Demon King and Roman Dmitri weren't the same. To ordinary people, both might seem to be in a class of their own, far above the rest, but the experiences that led them to reach that point differed. The Demon King had been powerful from the moment he gained consciousness. He'd gotten his powers without special effort and thus was unaccustomed to fighting someone on equal footing. He had always overwhelmed any opponent he faced. But what about Roman Dmitri? What about Junghik Bek? When his life had been at rock bottom, anyone could have seen that the young Junghik Bek was nothing more than a weak little boy. Yet he never accepted defeat. If he lacked strength, he used stones. When people accused him of cowardice, he ignored them and did everything he could to win. Thus, he trampled his competition. He spared no effort, used any means available to him. After ascending to the position of Divine Demon, people regarded Junghik Bek as a legend, but he hadn't lived the affluent life their praise suggested he had on the way there. That was the difference between them. When at a disadvantage, when equal, when at an advantage, whenever he went into a fight, all of those possibilities existed in Roman's mind. While the Demon King had never experienced a disadvantageous situation before, Roman Dmitri actually felt the most alive at the crossroads of life and death. That was why he had used sword manipulation instead of the Divine Demon Sword technique. He was able to identify the shortest path to victory, rather than relying on destructive power to crush his opponent underfoot. He had overwhelmed him. The Demon King was no match for Roman Dmitri. Footsteps crunched against the earth. Without answering the Demon King's question, Roman raised his sword high above the unresisting figure. "You will be an example to all." It was over. But the moment he began to swing the sword, the Demon King cried out desperately. "Roman Dmitri, I offer you a deal. Dimensional laws, I will tell you how to get around them." The sword halted mid-swing, right above his head. Peering down at him behind the cold steel of the blade were two cold, steely eyes. Only when cornered did the Demon King come to understand himself. In the face of defeat, he discovered an attachment to life that prevented him from simply accepting death. The Demon King spoke. "You are like Alexander." While Alexander's arrival and the rift it caused were unforeseen, he still showed the capacity to destroy dimensions. Meanwhile, you purposefully violated dimensional law by crossing into the Devildom. What do you think will happen if you return to Earth? Rifts will begin to appear on Earth within a few years at the earliest. Just like the Devildom, it will rapidly transform into an environment where life cannot survive. That was the truth. No being in the world could escape dimensional law, so if Roman Dmitri returned to Earth, problems were bound to follow. Whether he already knew that himself didn't matter. The reason the Demon King raised this issue was that he could offer a solution. "I shall pass the throne of the Demon King on to you. If you transcend human limits, you may not be completely free from dimensional law, but you can delay the phenomenon of rifts. Of course, for an immortal, the end of the Earth will eventually meet might not be preferable. So, when the time comes, you can just find a new world for the people of Earth to live in. Countless worlds exist beyond just the Devildom and Earth, and I am certain there is a new world among them that would be suitable for humans." His attachment to life was as intense as it was obvious. He wanted to live. To accept death after a single defeat. He was confident he would be able to get stronger in the future. He just needed time. Time to absorb this experience with Roman Dmitri. Then, he would turn the tables on him in their rematch. Roman Dmitri, God does not concern himself with the lives of mere humans. Your life, you must protect it yourself. This was the most surefire method to survive. If Roman Dmitri accepted this proposal, the Demon King would gain another chance to live in exchange for passing on his throne. To be honest, spending time attacking other dimensions wasn't a bad deal either. Until he gained confidence that he could defeat Roman Dmitri, he was willing to lend him his strength and fight alongside him. After all, conquering other dimensions had been his goal from the beginning. If he could achieve that, even through Roman Dmitri, his boring life would be filled with joy. Blood gushing from his heart, the Demon King looked up at Roman Dmitri with desperation and a strange, mad glint in his eye. "You are cut from the same cloth as I. Take my hand. I will willingly forge a new future together with you." The Demon King's proposal was certainly a solution to Roman Dmitri's problem. Dimensional laws weren't a problem that could be solved by ignoring them. Even if he defeated the Demon King, the moment he returned to Earth, the world would be plunged into ruin. There was no difference between him and Alexander in that regard. But from the moment he conversed with God until now, Roman Dmitri's stance remained unchanged. God had said, "If you reject my mandate and insist on going to the Devildom regardless, I will have no choice but to protect the balance between dimensions. After a grace period, I will return you to your original world, where your soul should no longer cause issues." That was enough for Roman. When he tied up his last loose end and returned to Earth, God made it clear he wouldn't just watch the destruction unfold but would take measures to prevent it. Which meant there was no reason for Roman to worry. After achieving all of his personal goals, Roman Dmitri could do what he deemed necessary, as always. The Demon King's proposal wasn't a bad one. If Roman had had a strong attachment to life, it certainly would have been worth considering. But I do not desire eternal life. Swish. He leveled his sword at the Demon King's neck, gazing down at him with cool indifference. Infinite life is a disaster for humans. If I accept your proposal, it might solve my problems in the short term, but I would have to repeat the life that tormented me. Getting to live as Roman Dmitri, getting to meet a strong opponent like you, and getting to know my people, for these reasons alone, I don't feel a shred of regret. As always, I will live and die as a human, faithful to my creed. He made the same choice now as he did back then. Just as he defied the heavenly mandate he'd been given at the moment of his ascension, Roman Dmitri wished to die as a human this time around, too. The Demon King stared at Roman Dmitri. It was pathetic. While he who had been defeated showed such longing for life, what kind of life had Roman Dmitri lived to accept his fate so calmly? Vile, miserable words surged up his throat. But now that even his final proposal had been rejected, he didn't want his death to be pitiful, too. Damned human. I ask you one last time, are you truly confident you won't regret it, even if you die? He wanted to hear the truth. In response, Roman Dmitri raised his sword. In his past life, and even now, he'd lived the life of a leader. And that meant he had no intention whatsoever of leaving behind threats to either himself or those around him. Therefore, that, too, is my choice to make. Flash. He cut off the Demon King's head right then and there. At that time, the rear guard was in hell. Their powerful resolve to fight for their lives, unlike in fairy tales, was quickly drowned out by screams. Quack! Yuck! Shrieks echoed in all directions. Demons, surging in like a black tide, tore at the soldiers' bodies, and though they did everything they could to resist, they couldn't handle the overwhelming numbers. Many people died. Everywhere he looked, soldiers were falling, and their commander, Chris, had already given up on survival. But I won't go down easily. Flash. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Demons' heads flew off with each swing of his sword. Chris advanced, mowing down everything in sight. His body had already reached its limit. From the moment he set foot in the Devildom until now, there hadn't been a proper moment's rest, and Chris hadn't sat still either, endeavoring to fill Roman Dimitri's shoes. He spent his every waking moment looking after those around him. Checking on people, striving for the impossible, he felt Roman's absence keenly. Lord Roman isn't just strong in might alone. How on earth could he bear this burden and carry us all this time? He was amazing. Many people believed in fate. Chris wasn't one of them, but he did believe Roman Dmitri was born to be a leader. Truthfully, he now knew that his dream of surpassing Roman Dmitri was truly preposterous. Even if he were granted eternal life, it could never be achieved. But things like results didn't matter to him anymore. He enjoyed advancing toward the goal named Roman Dmitri, and was glad to be able to stand at his side. He clenched his teeth. He drew up his aura. Though he had already cut down hundreds, he couldn't stop now. Beyond the darkness was his lord. Chris didn't want him, the man who believed in them and shouldered all of their burdens, to come back and discover that the rear guard had died disastrously without putting up a fight. He didn't consider for a moment that he might have lost. Lord Roman would surely win, so he wanted to prove himself to him in return. Rumble. Rumble. He advanced with a single-minded ferocity. Though alone after breaking from the ranks, Chris butchered every demon he encountered, no matter how many. He lost track of time. Advancing toward the endless darkness, Chris burned his life force as fuel. His mana had hit its limit. And once all of it was depleted, he would burn through the rest of his innate energy and die. But... Kek. Grrrk. Suddenly, confusion broke out in the enemy camp. The demons, who had been surging in like a tidal wave just moments ago, hesitated, and then, as if by agreement, they all scattered. It was a bewildering moment. Chris had just been bracing himself for death, so he couldn't understand the sudden change. Instantly, he looked in the direction of the Demon King's castle. There was only one possible explanation for why the demons would flee. Our Lord was victorious. There was no doubt about it. Roman Dmitri had done it. There was no time to catch their breath. Leaving the injured behind for now in case of any unforeseen complications, Chris hurriedly led the soldiers into the darkness. Hurry! What if the Demon King hadn't been the only enemy? What if Lord Roman was somehow still fighting? Chris prepared himself for the unexpected, and the swordsmen of Dmitri, though they were in far from ideal condition, followed his lead. Simply defeating the Demon King couldn't be called a true victory. They had to confirm with their own eyes that Roman Dmitri was alive and well. It was then that, in the distance, a familiar silhouette appeared. As the figure grew clearer, Chris's breath hitched. It was Roman Dmitri. He was walking toward them. And in his hand, a head presumed to be the Demon King's dripped blood. Chapter 456. The Conquest of the Devildom. Part 11. Everyone here trusted Roman Dmitri implicitly. They all believed he could defeat the Demon King, but also knew the plan wasn't as easy as it sounded. Their opponent was the Demon King. The land they stood on was the Devildom. The old history of the continent classified the devils as calamitous, and in the past, figures adorned with grand accolades were celebrated as heroes just for fending off their attacks. However, Roman Dmitri shattered the frame of common sense. The Demon King's head in his fist proved that Roman Dmitri was completely different from past heroes. Thud. He threw the head onto the ground. Those watching the Demon King's head roll across the dirt couldn't utter a single word in the face of such a great feat. The message this sight conveyed was clear. Victory. Roman Dmitri looked around at the stunned people and spoke. The Demon King is dead. Tears welled up in their eyes. People felt their emotions surge. With this, we have eliminated all threats against our world. Since the Demon King who led the invasion of Earth is dead, the devils of the Devildom can no longer covet our world. We have achieved a great feat. Scholars studying the continent's history, the bygone moments, told us how dangerous and reckless our actions were. If we had listened to them and chosen the safe path, our safety might have been guaranteed, but future generations would surely have endured the same suffering. No one appeared unscathed. Everyone was battered and soaked in blood, and the shadows on their faces spoke to just how much they had suffered. The fact was that victory would have been impossible without Roman Dmitri. Though they clearly all knew that, Roman Dmitri sincerely acknowledged the remarkable courage and sacrifice of the soldiers following him. He'd simply acted because he had the strength. But they, despite knowing they couldn't win themselves, willingly threw themselves into deathly peril solely because they trusted in him. That was why he took the Demon King's head. To keep his promise of granting them a future, he didn't desire a half-hearted ending. Know this. Future generations will remember this moment, and they will exist because of you. People's expressions became excited. It was over. The fight that began with the Continental War had finally come to an end. Let's go back to our world. At those words, people, as if waiting, let out tremendous cheers that seemed to shake the world. To return to Earth, they had to go back to the location where they first arrived. Sending a signal outside would open the passage, and the soldiers here would make a triumphant return home as heroes. As soon as I get back, I'm gonna chug beer for a whole week. Just thinking about has me fired up. What about me? Obviously, I gotta spend quality time with my pretty wife. No matter how understanding she is, I can't get drunk like you guys, considering we're newlyweds. I heard His Majesty the Emperor is going to give us a huge reward for participating in this war, so I'll take that money and live happily with my wife. I respect that. Their journey back was very different from their journey in. From the moment they arrived in the Devildom to the moment they reached the Demon King's castle, the soldiers had overcome hardships and adversities, risking their lives every moment. But now, time seemed to fly by. Chatting with the comrades walking beside them, the surrounding scenery changed rapidly, and the distance to their destination rapidly decreased. Everyone was filled with hope. There was a conviction that they could now think about the future. Their appearance. Isabel felt renewed emotions. As one of the only people in the world aware of the prophecy, she had shouldered a heavy burden alone, but looking at this hope-filled scene inspired complex feelings. First off, she was genuinely happy about finally achieving the peace she longed for. But on the other hand, the absence of Leo by her side was keenly felt, tempering her joy. Leo and the soldiers. Their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. If they hadn't delayed the Devildom's invasion for as long as they had, most of the soldiers speaking of hope now would have died. Our sacrifices weren't in vain. She was grateful yet apologetic. Though Isabel also sacrificed much, as the sole survivor, she couldn't help but bear the burden of those lost in her heart. But she wished to remember Leo and the soldiers even through the pain. Although her lifespan had been greatly reduced by using sacrifice, she still had plenty of things to do while she was still alive. I will look after your families. I will let everyone know the great sacrifice you have made for humanity, and make sure your families can live with pride in you. This was her new goal. Until she met her end, she would live for the people who believed in her. Isabel, just another human being, wished to live for the sake of others once again upon laying down the burden of the saintess. But this was different from sacrifice. This was something she was doing for herself. She was finally following her own heart. "We made it." A voice rang out from the front of the group. It took them several days to reach their destination. Now, if they signaled the people on Earth, they would open the passage connecting to the Devildom. Bright, beaming smiles chased the darkness around them away. At the thought of the hero's welcome that would soon await them, the soldiers couldn't hide their excitement, chatting boisterously. Roman Dmitri made no effort to get them to settle down. He watched them so silently that they may have even forgotten he was there, allowing them to enjoy this moment. Then, finally, screech. The world shook. But the moment the air warped and the portal began to form, a bolt of lightning struck Isabel's mind. Flash. "My child. Let me tell you the truth." It was God's voice. Isabel, eyes wide, stared into a space different from others and heard the shocking story. In reality, it didn't take too long. As the confusion in her mind subsided, Isabel turned her head to look at one man. "What on earth are you?" "Roman Dmitri." His hidden truth plunged Isabel into shock. They still had a brief moment before the portal was open and stable, so she requested a conversation with Roman Dmitri. Once they were a good distance from the others, her expression was solemn. "I heard the truth. That if you return to Earth, you will eventually be expelled from this world." Her voice trembled. After hearing God's story, her mind became tangled. She couldn't understand. Roman Dmitri was definitely a man who lived for himself. Even when she begged him to help her for the sake of humanity's future, he had refused and stayed true to the value he considered paramount. So why on earth had he made this choice? Even if he gained absolute power as Emperor of Dmitri, even if he conquered the Devildom and achieved perfect peace, if he couldn't exist in the world he would live in, what was the point of all his desperate efforts? She needed an explanation. The Roman Dmitri Isabel knew wasn't the type to make such an unbelievable choice. "It was what I wanted," he said. "Which makes even less sense to me. Why make such a choice?" "Isabel." His voice was calm. Though speaking of his own matter, Roman Dmitri showed no trace of wavering. "Everyone has their own goals. Your choice for humanity was a sacrifice in the purest sense, but I don't consider my choice a sacrifice. I promised the people who follow me that I would guarantee complete peace as a reward for their loyalty. As for me, ignoring existing threats isn't like me. That's all. Even if I live only a few days, I wish to live the life I desire." So there was no reason for me to hesitate because of the words God droned on about. She was speechless. He was truly an incomprehensible man. Though she thought she knew Roman Dmitri well by now, she couldn't understand why he chose self-destruction. "So you mean you'll just accept the consequences?" "Yes. You can't do that. To those people there, you are like a god. Everyone looks up to you. What will happen to this world if you disappear? Let's find a way to solve the problem instead. Let's buy some time by not returning to Earth for now. If we put our heads together, we can surely come up with a solution." She defied God's will. Or perhaps, God might have wished for her to react this way. Roman looked at Isabel. Even if, as Isabel said, there was a solution he hadn't thought of, it wasn't all that important to him. "Complete peace is perfected by my existence. People will only truly accept the peace before their eyes after confirming my safe return. Isabel, this too is my way of living for myself. Therefore, as the emperor ruling this world, I issue you a single command." He turned his gaze. In the distance, the portal had finally opened. As he began to walk toward it, he left Isabel with a warning. "Do not tell anyone the truth you know. Until the end, I will remain the being who reigns over this world." Lake Oscar, which had been deserted since Odelia's destruction, had recently been flooded with an innumerable crowd. Their nationalities and races were all different. People gathered from all over the continent, finding spots amidst the dense crowd where Lake Oscar wasn't even visible, and turned to prayer. "Oh God, please watch over us. Your Majesty, Emperor Roman Dmitri, you must return safely. You are humanity's only hope. Honey, please just come home alive." They, too, knew how reckless the conquest of the Devildom was. Moved by the will of those willing to sacrifice themselves for humanity, they couldn't simply wait in their homes for the war to be over. No one ordered them to come here. All around the continent, people spontaneously packed their belongings and left for Lake Oscar, and the crowd that had gathered in this place didn't leave their spots even as day turned to night over and over again. They prayed, and prayed again. For a safe return. For the people risking their lives for humanity to come home to their families. At their forefront was Romero Dmitri. He, his wife Rihanna Dmitri, and the families of key figures from various nations also stayed awake for days and nights, refusing to leave their spots. They were no different from anyone else in this crowd. Everyone here was in a position wishing for their family's safety, and their combined will illuminated Lake Oscar every night. And finally, a signal arrived from beyond the passage. At the news that the Continental Allied forces would be returning, the area around Lake Oscar buzzed with activity despite the early hour. Please grant salvation to humanity. They didn't yet know how things had ended. Worry and anticipation. Complex emotions gathered together. Time passed. As the portal finally connected, time seemed to stop. If all that lay beyond this portal were a handful of defeated survivors, if even Roman Dmitri was lost, the people here would have no choice but to accept humanity's destruction. Everyone prayed desperately. Prayed for humanity's victory, if victorious, prayed for their families' safety, if their families were safe, prayed for Emperor Roman Dmitri's survival. Their wills converged. As everyone gazed at one spot, the dimensional rift finally opened, revealing a massive passageway. And then they saw them. Step. A single man walking out from beyond the passage, and the soldiers following him. People's emotions surged. It was certain. The moment they confirmed that the man at the lead was Roman Dmitri, people bowed their heads and shouted loud enough to shake the world. "Your Majesty the Emperor! Congratulations on your safe return. Your Majesty the Emperor! Congratulations on your safe return. Your Majesty the Emperor! Congratulations on your safe return." Hearing the explosive cheers of the people in the front, those toward the back who hadn't yet laid eyes on the portal also raised their voices joyfully. That was the moment they knew that they had won the war. That humanity survived. And that their families were home. Later, even after a long time had passed, people never forgot the events of this day. When the god named Roman Dmitri descended upon Earth, true peace finally arrived in the world. And so, 3 years passed since the conquest of the Devildom.